It's only Annihilator against the clock. Falcon Sailster in pursuit. They're coming to the finish. O'Donnell going to work. Here's Annihilator. Here's the final time. 1:49.3. This is the fastest race mile in history.
Hello, it's Bob Pandolfo, and welcome to Power Brush. And we're going to talk about some harness racing today, and I'm going to talk about sulkies again, but something a little bit different as opposed to the length of the sulky. You know, sometimes I'll hear people say, and some horsemen have actually said this publicly, that they don't think that the sulkies have anything to do with the faster times that the horses go now as compared to years ago. That's definitely not true. I don't know, you know, I mean, I could agree that the horses are somewhat faster. I know Yannick Gingras made a good point to me that, you know, he thinks that particularly the regular raceway horses, it's kind of the ordinary, you know, everyday horses are probably overall more athletic and faster. When you look at the top echelon, though, I think that I don't think there's as much of a difference personally. But anyway, I want to show you an article from this from Sports Illustrated back in 1976. So this was an article about the speed and harness racing, and it actually was talking about a particular horse, a 2-year-old. Now this was in 1976 when the Modified Sulky first came out. That was designed by Joe King, and that was the first really well, let me put it this way. It's not the first change to sulkies, but it had been the first change in the evolution of sulkies in a very, very long time. You know, the sulky that they used during the 1960s, 1970s, 1950s even, you know, it was the wood sulky. It was, you know, just a standard sulky. So you see it, if you look at this, and this is from the Sports Illustrated article from 1976, it says, during all of 1975, there were 712 races in which the winner was clocked in 2 minutes or less. With a fair amount of racing still to come this year, because this was written in the summer, there have been nearly 1,500 winning 2-minute miles. Ordinary horses are turning in championship times. All right, now we're going to go to my next one here. So this is the horse that they were talking about. As if to underscore this point, Jade Prince, a little-known 2-year-old Canadian pacer, showed up at the Red Mile, a track rated as one of the 2 fastest in the nation, and promptly toured the course in 1:54 1/5, the fastest time ever recorded in a race by any standardbred, let alone a 2-year-old. So here it was in 1976, Jade Prince, a 2-year-old, went the fastest mile in the history of the sport. And of course he was wearing a Modified Sulky. Now, here's some interesting things. Okay, attempts at explaining the speed breakthrough often sound like explanations offered when a lamp is knocked over in a kid's room. The best excuse any of them can come up with is the wind must have done it. Hempt and others know it's not the wind. They're talking about Max Hempt. They also know deep down what one of the major factors is, the Modified Sulky. But the admission sticks in many throats. Well, of course, the breeders wanted to believe it was, you know, the breed that was changing. This controversial new piece of equipment has been on tracks less than a year. In its various forms, it is lighter than the conventional bike. Its fans say that it is balanced better, and it shifts the weight from the front legs of the horse to the rear, thus improving the lifting action, especially of the pacers, that its wind resistance is less, and that its wheels track better. Okay, and then we go to this section. Stanley Dancer, one of the premier driver trainers, gives most of the credit for the fast times to the new sulkies. Even though I don't like them, Dancer believes they are shaving times as much as 2 seconds for a given horse, but he wonders about their safety. And then let's see what else I have. One more section here. With sulky designs almost certain to be improved still further, yes they were, the idea of a 150 mile is suggested with a straight face. And of course now we're up to like 146 3, I think it is. O'Brien, this is talking about Joe O'Brien, agrees it is not unthinkable. So the reason why I wanted to show this is because, you know, like I said, I've heard people say, oh, you know, it has nothing to do with the sulkies. These are the horses. It's all about the horses. They're faster. It's the breed. The breed has changed, you know. Well, I mean, you know, I was handicapping the horses every day for Sports Eye back in 1976, and betting the horses every day. And you know, we saw that as soon as every driver had the modified sulky, every track record was completely crushed, and every world record was crushed. So, and there was no sensational new sire or anything like that. It was just, you know, it was the bike, you know. And they saved 2 seconds. Actually think some horses on a 1 mile track were probably more like 3 seconds faster in the modified sulky as opposed to the wood sulkies. You know, you have to remember, I mean, there's such a huge difference. I mean, even where the bike was hitched, the wooden bikes were hitched more along the flank of the horse, where as you know, once they started to develop the modified sulky and continue to, you know, modernize these sulkies, they started, you know, hitching them up higher on the horses, which of course gave them more freedom. So, you know, just the idea that it's all like the horses got a lot faster. Now, I know people would say, okay, well, that's 2 seconds there, whatever, you know, so, but they've gotten a lot faster. But the thing is that the bikes kept getting faster. You know, not everybody's aware of the changes in the bikes. Even after the modified sulky was gone and they were using bikes like the Telstar and the Gerald, you know, they were faster than the modified sulky. And then let's see, it was 2002, 2003, right around there. That was the first offset bike. It was called the Advantage 6.3. It was actually 6.3 inches offset, meaning that it was tilted. It was actually crooked. So what they did is they designed it so the wheels were closer to the hub rail. Or now it's the pylons, but you know, years ago they had a hub rail also. But basically closer to the inside to get, so I don't know if people are aware of that, but all these bikes that they use now are crooked. And then so the Advantage, which is sometimes called the Harmer because there was a horseman named Tom Harmer, who I believe developed the first one. That was significantly faster than any other bike that had come along also. I mean, and again, I know this for a fact because I keep speed tables, and I have a friend of mine who's a serious player, and you know, been around a long time, and he keeps his own speed tables. His tables are very sophisticated, and every time a new generation of sulky came out, we had to change our tables because they were, you know, like when the Advantage came out in 2002, 2003. By 2003, I think everybody had one, and all the track records again were crushed. And of course, what happens is when the Advantage first came on the track, only 1 or 2 drivers had it. Same thing when you go back with the modified sulky. And of course, those drivers then had a tremendous edge. They were winning all the races. You go back to the modified sulky, Tom Merriman and Muradoki at one point, the only ones in New York who had it. And all of a sudden, they were beating, you know, Hervé Fillion and Carmine Avitel on a regular basis. So, you know, they had the bike. Hervé Fillion and Carmine didn't have the bike, you know, and they were the 2 best drivers. And Muradoki and Tom Merriman beat him a lot, you know, Tom Merriman. And the same thing happened with the Advantage in 2003. So what happens is, and this is the thing that I think people have to understand too. Why do the sulkies keep changing? Why do they get faster and faster? It isn't for, you know, the betterment of the sport. It's because there's entrepreneurs who want to make money. So they know that if you come out with a sulky and it's not faster than the sulky before, there is no reason for anyone to buy it. So what they do is they introduce a sulky, like for instance, you know, they give with the Advantage bike, the 6.3, you know, you give it to one driver. Hey, try this out. That driver starts to win a lot more races. So the other drivers are like, oh, I want to get one of those, you know. And of course, after a few drivers have them, then you have to get one because you know. Joe O'Brien, the great Hall of Famer, found this out the hard way. If you go back to the modified sulky, in fact, it says in the Sports Illustrated article that Joe O'Brien didn't like these bikes, you know, and he said, I'm going to drive my wooden bike, you know. But the thing is Joe O'Brien went into a terrible slump, and you know he couldn't win because He didn't, his bike was so much slower. So what happens is then they have to buy the new bike. So for the people that are manufacturing these bikes and developing these bikes, it's a money grab. I mean, it's, they're doing it to make money. They don't do it for the betterment of the sport. And in order to get these drivers to dish out thousands of dollars for a new bike, you have to develop a bike that's faster. Otherwise, there's no reason for them to buy it, because they'll be, somebody comes out with a new bike and he's not beating you, you're not going to care. So what happened was then, after the Advantage, then I believe the first 10-inch offset was the UFO. But then it went on from there, and now the bikes are all, I believe most of them are 10-inch offsets. There's so many Sulkys. There are something like 60 approved Sulkys. I mean, in any given race, you could have all these different Sulkys, which is kind of odd. To me, they should all be the same Sulky. Another thing people say is all the Sulkys are the same speed. That's impossible. I mean, it's literally impossible. And they might not be a huge difference between each Sulky, but I mean, if there's engineering differences from one Sulky to the next, then it's possible that there's a Sulky in the race that's actually a little faster than other Sulkys. You know what I mean? Because there's so many different approved Sulkys now, and of course, like as I've showed in my other videos, the Sulkys are much longer now. So the driver is sitting way back. He's like in the back seat compared to years ago. They used to sit close to the horse. Now they're far behind, and because that's, as I mentioned in my other video that I recently did, that's a big problem in harness racing, and everybody knows it. I mean, everybody knows that the bike shouldn't be that long, and the driver shouldn't be leaning back. I mean, everybody knows that that's bad for the sport. So if you're really going to ask, how much faster are the horses now? I think Gingras makes a good point, Yannick Gingras, that the everyday horses are probably more athletic, and a lot of the old time horsemen have said that, including some of the horsemen that unfortunately have passed away. They said that over the years as the Sulkys changed, but they also said, hey, I think the breeding's changing because a lot of these kind of regular raceway horses are better gated. But I mean, let's just evaluate though the top echelon. You can see at the beginning of my Power Brush videos, I have Annihilator setting a world record at the Meadowlands in 149.3. That's one of his world records. I mean, he ended up, I believe his second world record was 149.1. This one was really impressive though, because the race didn't set up for him. He went, he kind of made the fractions himself. Annihilator, to me, was the fastest horse I ever saw. I mean, he faced a phenomenal crop. I mean, some of the fastest horses that have ever come out of one crop, and he had to face all the horses. I mean, he faced a lot of really good horses. I mean, I remember I counted 7 millionaires that he defeated. So he was a machine, and of course, so was Niatros and other horses. But the thing is, all right. So his fastest time was 149.1, and he was in the Modified Sulky. So now, in order for him to compete against the top echelon now, he'd have to go like a couple seconds faster. But the Modified Sulky, I can guarantee you, is a couple seconds slower than what they're using now. I mean, like, there's no question, because every time, and they went to these, as these bikes evolved, like I said, every time there was a major shift, all the track records fell. The Advantage 6.3 in 2003, I mean, all the track records fell. And that wasn't because of some super sire. That was the bike. Same thing with the Modified. And then when they went to the 10-inch, more, all those track records fell, So it's leveled out a little bit in recent years. I mean, I don't know if you can make the bikes any faster. But if you go back, to like 2005, 2006, like several years after the Advantage 6.3, when the UFO came out and bikes like that, from that point on, the evolution, the bike hasn't evolved as much as far as the times go. But there was that stretch from 1976 to like 2006, 2007, where the bikes, the speed of the bikes was like dramatically faster, and maybe, I mean, I think probably 6 seconds. So and I'm talking about from the wood bike, by the way. But I mean, you could be looking at 3 or 4 seconds from the modified. So if it was 3 seconds, that would make Annihilator, that would be, he could possibly go in 1:46.1 in one of the modern Sulkies, on a 1 mile track. And there's no question in my mind that if you took, I'm using Annihilator because, he was an, exceptional horse. There's no question that he could go as fast as the top horses today if you put him in one of these bikes. And I think that's the same with Niatros. Now, if you go back to Brett Hanover and Albatross, now they were the two. Albatross was the last great horse to race in the wood bike. And Brett Hanover I never saw. I mean, that was before my time, but I mean, he was a monster. So Brett Hanover, I think, 1:53.4 in the wood bike. Yeah, I mean, you could easily slice 6 seconds off of that. So like I said, Brett Hanover, I think, and Albatross, and probably maybe even Adios Butler, who was also before my time. They all raced in wood bikes. You put those horses in what they're using now, and you're gonna, they're right up there. You're gonna slice 6-7 seconds off their time from years ago, because there's a huge difference between a wood bike and what they're using now. And you can just imagine yourself. I mean, just the way these things are hooked to the horse. Like, say you were going to run a 40-yard dash, and we put a belt on you and put shafts, like thick wooden shafts along the side, pulling a cart, and you ran 40 yards, and then you come back and we put a thinner, more streamlined bike, and instead of putting it on your waist, we put it up on your shoulders, right? You'd run the 40-yard dash faster because you'd have more freedom of movement. And and more, I guess people that don't understand physics or engineering, don't really get this. But the bikes are a lot different. Even the wheels are a lot better. If you take one of these wheels, you put the bike sideways and you spin the wheel, it keeps spinning for a long time because the bearings and the whole design of the bike, of the wheels, is improved. Compared to years ago. So it's all improved, as far as the equipment goes. As far as, like I said, the everyday horses, I'm sure they might be, they probably are more athletic. It's really, really hard to tell, though, with the top echelon. I personally don't think there's much of a difference between most of the top horses today and a horse like Annihilator. I think Annihilator, if he was, here right now, he'd be unbeatable, in one of the new bikes. And Niatros, same thing. Maybe even Brett Hanover, I know watching Annihilator, and I'll finish up with this. I came into the Meadowlands to call the charts one night years ago, and Annihilator was just about to race in his third and final baby race. 2-year-old. He hadn't made his first parimutuel start yet, and I couldn't believe what I saw. William Houghton was driving him, and he left. Took the lead, gave up the lead, retook the lead again before the half, gave up the lead, retook the lead on the final turn. So he made 3 moves to the lead and just drew off on the wraps. So, and the next day in my column in Sports Eye, I said, I saw this horse Annihilator last night, this 2-year-old. I said, this could be the next super horse. And as it turned out, the syndicate and the owners, they used that quote in an ad for Annihilator at one point. He was just a freak. I don't see how he could be a better horse. And like I said, he beat such unbelievable horses. He faced some of the fastest horses, Dragon's Lair, Falcon Seal Stir. It goes on and on. And he faced some tough older horses too. But anyway, I just wanted to, put this out there because, again, if you hear people say, the horses, that all the difference in times is the horses, and it has nothing to do with the Sulkies. That is absolutely not true. It's ridiculous to even say that. But anyway, lots of luck in your harness handicap. Remember that please subscribe to my YouTube page. It's free. I'll have more videos coming up. Thanks.